Hey everyone, we're now live. Uh, Hi, baseliners. Welcome once again to another episode of Baseline Office Hours in India. I'm very excited about this new community which is building up in India. My name is Samrat Kishor, and I'm one of the technical steering committee members of Baseline Protocol, as well as the head of community in India. Uh, and I'm here to assure you that there are tons and tons of announcements which are coming. There are some big organizations which have committed to joining Baseline Protocol as contributors. And at the same time, we're also looking for individual contributors to join us as maintainers. So you're welcome to come on board, reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and we can start interacting and we can and you can come on board. If you are watching this video on YouTube, do subscribe to the channel. This is a common channel which Baseline Protocol uses to communicate all announcements as well as host office hours where developers can come and get support on things that they're building. I'm joined with Chris Paul. He's from Canada. Chris, I would ask you to introduce yourself in a little bit. I'm also joined with Mark Haddle. Mark is from the enablement team of Baseline Protocol, and I'm going to talk about big time today. We are going to talk about enablement. How do we go to market? So two sides to adoption, which I see, and that's why I invited Mike over this Saturday morning of his to talk about enablement and go to market, because I think the biggest challenge which people face is where to place baseline protocol. I think that's something which we are seeing consistently. Is that right, Mark? Yeah. So
That
so
is correct.
absolutely. So I think a lot of companies which have reached out to me or the community members in other countries as well, that uh, this baseline protocol efforts generally fall into the blockchain guy's lap. I think that is something which needs to change. It has to go to the CIO or the CISO, and then we start looking at all integrations which a particular organization is doing, and then we decide. So on one side, it can be integrations. On the other side, you can be a product organization which is building products which enable multi-party integrations, intercompany processes, and cool stuff like that. So in any B2B transactions, there may be multiple players involved, maybe in different geographies, maybe in different countries as well. So what Baseline Protocol does is it provides products, a set of tools and techniques to start transacting, to start synchronizing their records without really exchanging any data. So that's the key. And as the co-founder of Baseline Protocol says very often that no data should ever be placed on blockchain, right, Mark?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That happens to be our war cry, if you will. No data on the blockchain, only proofs and hashes go on blockchain. So I think with that, I'd invite Mark. Mark, talk to us a little about what you're seeing in terms of enablement and adoption for baseline protocol. Who are the players who are talking to you, and what are the day-to-day conversations that they're having uh, while incorporating baseline protocol in their current or future products?
Well, a lot of us basically have had quite a bit of experience in the blockchain space and went through this process with that emerging technology. And the first thing that we keep thinking about is, what are the well-meaning mistakes that we made along that way, and we want to make
Hmm.
sure that we do not have, a repeating of that. And so, one of the big things that we keep wondering about is, trying to look at it through the eyes of the audience. What is it that, what we are bringing is going to make their lives easier, or at least make their lives, suck less. and, you know,
Faster?
and, and so, and really that's, because, blockchain technology, has a lot of very powerful capabilities. It's, making people that are not the true believers like us, become true believers. And so, the first thing that we want to do is take a look at, any type of process that is already either fully automated or um, has been, a lot of the low level tasks have been
Hmm.
largely relegated to a self executing environment.
Yeah.
Um, and, to be able to have, that self execution, whether it's a smart contract or a record keeping, um, it's really, a lot of it, a lot of it pretty much sells itself as soon as you get that aha moment within the audience, where they basically say, oh, okay, that's exactly how this works. And
Yeah.
one thing that we do within enablement is we really de-emphasize the term blockchain, um,
Yeah.
because it has so much baggage to it. Because the minute you bring up blockchain, everyone's mind starts thinking either about cryptocurrencies, or they'll start, looking at some other type of use case that they might have, read about within the past 2 years, but really hasn't seen production or has failed completely. So, we really start to use distributed architecture. We'll start using decentralized environments. That generally tends to, avoid a lot of the baggage that the term blockchain comes with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and, a lot of times, we start to look at what is the role of blockchain technology within a business process. And
Hmm.
before, a lot of people, when they were starting to work on blockchains, is they thought of them as either entire architectures or very, very robust databases, robust and expensive databases. And, right now you start to look at a role of blockchain, that has quite, a little bit more of a middleware type role, specifically within baseline, where we are
Yeah.
basically proving with zero knowledge that my record keeping matches yours. And that really attacks one of the persistent problems that
Yeah.
has really escaped a lot of technology and automation, is back office reconciliation. Generally, that is going to be anywhere from 40 to 60% of your operational costs are in that lag time, having counterparties agree. That
Absolutely. You bring in a very interesting point here. Yeah.
my record
Yeah.
keeping matches yours. And so, um, especially in an environment to where I don't want to reveal anything, I don't want
Yeah.
to, give my competitors, maybe an advantage,
Yeah.
just by revealing something. I want to be able to, it's almost like two messengers on the other side of a wall. My name is Tom. What is? And he's like, my name is John, and
Yeah.
that it's going to be correct, and you can prove it. And so, and that brings blockchain away from being that single source of truth, uh,
Hmm.
that we looked at, when we were really starting to evangelize blockchain technology, into, with baseline, the technology is more that proof of consistency.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
proving that consistency is really key, because it basically takes the cycle times and the reconciliation, from anywhere from days or months to mere seconds. And so,
Absolutely.
if you take a look at a lot of different business environments that would really have an advantage of that, within supply chain, within identity, within healthcare is one that I, always bring up all the time, because healthcare has very strict data privacy requirements, to where they're like, I am very limited what I can do as far
Yeah.
as trying to prove a consistency in my data sharing and handoff.
Yeah.
And to be able to do this where all of the data stays within each system of record, I am
Yeah.
just proving to you that my record keeping matches yours. And so if you look at, the biggest advantage of that would be, within the cycle times involved in adjudicating a healthcare claim within the
Yeah.
year and
Yeah.
stuff.
It's a
You know,
great example. Yeah.
yeah, which even in, under ideal conditions takes 60 to 90 days. And there's just it's an enormous amount of, fraud and waste that really come about from exploiting these long lag times. And,
Hmm.
a lot of people say, really just throw their hands up and say, there's nothing we can do about it. Well, with baseline, you can pretty much say, yes, there is something you can do about it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you will not see any change within your protocol. You will not see any eroding of your compliance. You will not see anything that would basically, cause you to run afoul of that. Um, so, I mean, within supply chain as well, having to, match up, when you start to see, supply chain uh,
Hmm.
where, it's easy to keep the first, two or three interactions within a supply chain. It's when you start to get to steps, 12, 19, 35, around in there. And most of the people that far downstream have no idea what happened back in the origin. This way,
Yeah.
everyone can see the entire movement, of
Yeah.
something that they're tracking or that they're paying attention to.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this is a way that you have that, that transparency, and it can, of
Yeah.
course, you can control the access as far as, who's allowed to see it and all of that. But at the same time, you are not putting any data, nothing is flowing outside of the four walls of where it's supposed to.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think you made some really great points, Mark. One of the things which I came across, one in a recent conversation with a now new believer of baseline. I was having this chat, and it came out that it's not only about synchronization, saving costs and time, but it's also about a great experience. When you're transacting with an organization which is open to baselining their processes, and that also means transactions going through faster, payments going through faster, no friction at all. Everything is hunky dory. I think that's the kind of differentiator which this guy also saw, which was sort of a cool point for me as well. That, yeah, you know what, while you were talking about all the business value which we can generate, I think we're all missing out the intangible value, which is also the delight, be it customers, vendors, even our own employees. They are frustrated at times doing stuff which they should not be doing, reconciling and making calls and sending emails and responding to all those calls on the other side. So I think it's a win-win for all parties who are involved, either service providers or even product companies who've got nothing to do with technology in general.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
one thing that baseline, another thing that baseline really has huge potential with is you're going to have a lot of companies that have, made quite a bit of investments in time and resources into blockchain solutions within the past
Yeah.
2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
and really are having trouble either scaling or really completing that last mile. And
Yeah.
what baseline allows them to pivot while still maintaining many of the elements of the service agreement. A way of
Hmm.
saying, look, instead of trying to build this entire distributed architecture, this is a way that you keep what you already have, and this basically acting as middleware, will basically prove that consistency between the two state machines, um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and also within multi-party environments. Um, that's really an advantage that that we've worked at within Baseline. We've had a couple of the participants, some of the companies that are some of our plank holders,
Yeah.
have had tremendous success coming in and saying, are you having trouble with your Hyperledger Fabric uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
project? Are you
Yeah.
really just running into the same problems that so many other people? Here's a way
Hmm.
that you can actually pivot away from this, so you can sleep at night, and so you can actually have, a good conversation with your senior management when they ask about project or progress.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is a way of actually pivoting. So,
Yeah.
um, because a lot of these business cases were still fully fledged out. It's just maybe
Hmm.
we weren't quite using the best tool for the job. We thought so at the time, but
Yeah.
everyone else is running into the same problems with scaling. and you just really, especially scaling, but also the last mile when it comes to user environments,
Yeah,
really are just it's success has become elusive, and
yeah,
baseline is a way to actually pivot and achieve that success.
yeah. They can actually get rid of their technical debt. I think they can also talk to, as you rightly pointed out, they can talk to their senior management in a way that, um, hey, you're cutting out. You there, Mark? Oh yeah,
Oh,
you're here. Okay.
yeah,
No, I was saying that, one, they get rid of the technical debt that they've gathered over a period of time, experimenting with various blockchain projects in various shapes and forms. They can also look at, the investments which had got in. I think that it's a time to sort of salvage them. And not just salvage, of course. One side is, of course, salvage, but the other side is, of course, thinking of a new business model. Somewhat, what John is doing. He keeps talking about it, so I can also reference to it that he's doing securitization of invoices. I think these are new models which are only made possible because of things like baseline. Now we can now two systems which may be legacy systems, or it can be as simple as an SAP talking to a Google Sheet.
mhm,
Um, can exchange data, can synchronize data, or states, so to say. So I think very important point that you brought out was that it's the last mile. I think that part a lot of people are missing. That the conversation goes in the direction of which blockchain to pick. I think that's a different conversation. That's not the conversation that a baseliner should be having. A baseline should be having a conversation around which are my systems, which are my processes which need baselining.
right,
And I think that's why I keep talking to people. I say, KYB, know your business. Which are the processes which are required to talk to outside parties, and or even within the same company, two different entities, two different geographies. I mean, I know a company which is doing which has 400 people sitting just consolidating balance sheet from their multiple countries coming in. So there are tons of use cases. I think the industries, various industries are full of places where there are transaction interactions, even within the same company or different companies. But what we really need is we need a voice within the organization, that may be the head of blockchain, that may be the head of digital transformation, that may be the CIO, that may be the CDO, being that voice and taking up baseline as an initiative where we sort of go scan the business for opportunities. We pick up the ones which are ripe, in two sense. One is, of course, is the business capable of handling something new coming in? Is it open to that change? Second is, what is the community, where is the community moving, where are these, the flag bearers or the plank holders, as you said, are moving, within the baseline universe. So I think these two things taken care, I think it is a great time to be adopting baseline. That's what I feel. This is, and as I said in the last live stream as well, that people are going to have a feeling of being in a time machine when they see people who've joined in now versus people who joined, let's say, a couple of years down the line.
mhm.
So they're going to have that feeling. Second, and one very interesting point, I think it's your third or fourth interesting point. I think you just added so many kicks to this episode. Mark, thank you so much for making it. So you spoke about hyperledger projects. I think those were the most ambitious one, and those were the ones which enterprises had jumped on. So I think now they need a relook at what really caused that failure. Were we aiming for the stars, or were we aiming to for something which is, yes, purely doable but not scalable, or we were aiming for something which was doable, but absolutely nobody knows what went wrong, and then they ran into a situation where their investments ran out, and they all just shunned the project and started collaborating on other things. I have seen all these three categories, really. I've spoken to people involved in all three categories of projects, and I do believe when they see this, either they speak up or not, but when they see this, they are going to have a feeling that yes, I think it can be revived. There are tons of projects which are sitting on racks, which can be pulled out, dusted, and revived, uh, by integrating with baseline, something like baseline.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I would say a common result that many of the people that have worked within blockchain use cases and stuff is they wind up with a solution that is extremely robust and
yeah,
extremely capable, but
yeah,
is really so overpowerful that what you really need for the job. I mean, I use the analogy, it's like you are watering your windowsill flower pot with a fire hose. It works really well, but it's just far and beyond what you'd ever need.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
and and also another thing that I think a lot of people started to realize as they moved, from proof of concept to an MVP into a pre-production environment, is
mm,
blockchain. From a user environment, blockchain as a technology is very invisible. I mean, it's not
yeah,
really going to show anything. It
yeah,
really is of grave importance to people that need auditing and
yeah,
need the query of the technology. But as you're just going through a regular operational environment, blockchain is in the background, just
absolutely,
securing everything. But you as a user are not going to notice that. Um,
yeah,
now with baseline, I would say it's has a little bit more visibility because if you have within a user environment to where you're dealing with different counterparties,
mm,
and you have a certain piece of a record or piece of data that you need
yeah,
to validate with your counterparty, you can have basically a small icon that comes up that says baseline true or baseline false if you use a boolean. Um,
mm,
and you'll just be able to say, yes, this is baseline. So that gives, just by having, certain documents or certain, elements that are baseline, that are proven, you now have that confidence, within that, 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 that data that you're comparing. And so really, where was I going with this? Having that confidence, is going to really start to bring forth the adoption because,
mm,
confidence is very compelling. It's very sexy. It's very, I mean, it really clears a lot of the fog out there. And that's what people are going to start saying. Hey, these people over here, they're really racking it up because, what are they doing? Well,
mm,
they're baselining their workflows. What's that?
yeah,
Well, and this is how we explain it. So so within the enablement team, we really start to look at what is it that we want to be heard as opposed to what are we trying to tell. I
exactly,
think that's one of the big problems that we within the early days of blockchain was we were so passionate about the
mm,
technology, and we just started telling all of these we started bringing up hash rates, and we started talking about nonces, and we started talking about
yeah,
yeah a chain of blocks and sort of stuff. And we thought that was so cool, and we're looking at eyes that are really glazed over, and people are checking their watch, and they're starting to look at their phone, and they're looking around because we've lost them.
yeah,
And this is almost like, hey, come on, this is really cool. And they're like, I'll be the judge of that. Just tell me, show me something that is going to make my
yeah,
life easier or make my job suck less. So
yeah,
um, so that's really what we've been focused on,
yeah,
is make sure that we still have that audience engagement from the beginning and start with a problem and say, this is what you live and breathe every day. Well, this is
mm,
how we can make it, so much simpler. And you can
yeah,
actually, move the workflow to fruition or completion, in a fraction of the time.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, absolutely. I think that's a great thought, Mark. I think this whole messaging, this whole shift or flip in messaging that you're talking about, I think this is really important, and a lot of people miss that point. They just blabber, they just hammer what they want to hammer, and they don't want to listen to the other side. And especially, I feel, especially talking about blockchain, I feel when people start throwing things like hash rates and and blocks per second and stuff like that. I think that's when they run out of content, when they start throwing technical stuff to throw the other person out of their shoes. So I think it's important that the people who are talking about enablement should be the ones who can talk about business value
Mhm.
first. I
Yeah.
think I think technology comes later on. When we've gone through the gut, then comes the brain. I think that's the biggest advantage um, I see in Baseline's enablement team, and ably. In you're enabling the enablement team, I would say that.
Mhm.
So kudos to the work so far, Mark. Really, I think I've had a lot of conversations. I would also share. Now I'm on the enablement calls as well, so I will share my experiences as well of what are the kind of questions I'm getting, and I'm sure tons of our other members are also getting questions from leaders who want to join in, but they just want to test the waters first. So there
Mhm.
are things which are in the works. There are some Indian companies as well who are calling me or messaging me. In fact, I got messages while we were doing this. So you would have seen me checking my phone a lot of times because there were constant buzz. So there's a lot of interest, I would say, definitely, but people seem to be treading very carefully, after that whole hype and fall of a blockchain. People at some point in time thought that, and it was very famously tweeted on Twitter as well multiple times, that blockchain is a problem looking for solutions, or
Mhm.
blockchain is the solutions looking for problems. That.
It is a hammer looking for nails.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So
A big shiny, expensive hammer that was um, looking for nails.
yeah,
Or, one of the big things that I persistently ran into was, there were a lot of assumptions that were made at the very beginning, and one of the big,
yeah,
I think, probably fatal assumptions that were made was that blockchain was going to replace much of the existing architecture.
yeah,
It's new, distributed, robust
yeah,
technology, and many of the people that you were really pitching the adoption to were people that said, "Look, we are either in the middle of, or we have recently completed a massive multi-scale ERP implementation." And anyone that's ever been through an ERP implementation knows the pain that is involved with that, and it's not something people want to go through very
yeah,
often. But these were already architectures that are represented multi-million-dollar investments over multi-year
mm,
implementation schedules, and
mm,
they were not going anywhere. And so
yeah,
they say, we like your blockchain thing, but we're already too deep into the ERP and we're not
yeah,
changing. And with baseline, you can say, excellent, that's glad you're in an ERP. We now
yeah,
have a way that you can build all of the ERP systems, using an ecosystem approach with network effects. I mean, that, can then prove the consistency, and you don't have the capital investment
absolutely,
anywhere near
absolutely,
what it would require for a large scale implementation, especially
yeah,
within an ERP environment. And
yeah,
plus, you're actually giving a turbocharging of the capability, because now, even though you had this really big ERP,
yeah.
you're still waiting on your counterparties to validate.
Exactly. You're
And
still you're still sitting on the same problems. You just have a fancy container to keep those to store those
yes,
problems.
yeah,
So just with a bolt on, with let's say a 2 to 5% cost, and that too in OPEX mode, you can get rid of your problems, and then I would say that this is a true transformation, not just implementation of a new cool system, but
right.
a real transformation of processes or the organization in general.
Yeah, yeah, and and there is a cost, to for the transactions and stuff,
Mm,
in the form of gas and stuff. But I tend to tell people, I said it's fairly negligible, especially if you look at what are you spending in postage, having to mail
mm,
paper back and forth. And I have people come and ask me, they say, "Does anyone really use paper anymore?" Yes, they do,
yes,
because that
yes,
is what their service agreement calls for, and that is what
yeah,
they have been doing for decades. And there's, hey, this. this process, clumsy and expensive as it may be, it works, and it serves the purpose that we, have been working on.
Hmm.
So, why are we necessarily going to change it? We can try and digitize it, maybe do some batch updates and do, some back and forth, but
Yeah.
through EDI or some other protocol,
Yeah.
and they basically just are. Um, uh, Sitting back, still doing the same process. And so the transactional costs, when you start to look at the larger picture, are really
Yeah.
negligible compared to
Yeah.
that. One other aspect, that we pay attention to is, especially when you're pitching a client and stuff, and you're explaining to where, hey, we're going to eliminate, the reconciliation, we're going to eliminate the friction and the lag time and stuff, and you'll have some. We had a client that basically said, "This is wonderful. It's incredible.
Hmm.
Get out of my
Hmm.
office," because you know 35 or 40% of our operational revenue is on the
Yeah.
multi-year call centers that we operate and run, to to tackle this persistent problem. You're basically,
Yeah.
if we did this, it would cannibalize such a huge portion of our revenue, and no, we're not going to do it.
Hmm.
you know, so some companies, are in the business. We are service oriented, and we
Yeah.
maintain a large, body of talent and resources in, pushing this paper, checking this going back,
Yeah.
checking all of this going back and forth
Yeah.
um, in all of that. So, and we're paid fairly handsomely for it. So, if we were
Yeah.
to do that, it would completely remove that. And I just say, well,
Hmm.
when it comes to contract renewal time, you need to be aware of it
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
your client is going to say, hey, why are we spending all of this when we can actually do this, take this in house? We don't need to contract for someone
Yeah.
for call center data, our mail
Yeah.
room, our back office. We can
Yeah.
actually bring this in house.
Yeah.
That will,
Yeah.
that will step on some toes.
No, absolutely. And you know what? I think with this, I was talking to somebody just yesterday, and he's the promoter of a fairly large company, and they are into the business of invoice discounting, and their company when they started off, they are into, that business is also running. They're into processing invoices on behalf of their clients.
Yeah.
They're into account payable processing and account receivables as well, and HRO as well. So I was talking to the promoter of this company, and I was saying that, this gives us an opportunity to create a gold standard of an organization, which does not have net 30, net 60. It pays you in a week,
Mhm.
because you don't need reconciliation, you don't need a paper trail to prove that the service or the goods have been delivered. It's been done. So all that is standing between you and your vendor's delight is your willingness to pay them. And if you don't have that willingness, then it's a different question. But if you have that, then show it to the world,
Oh,
right?
and absolutely. And if you flip that a little bit onto the lender side,
Hmm.
because that is a persistent problem within invoice financing, is how do
Yeah,
I know that I am the only one that has bought this invoice?
exactly,
That
exactly.
single golden copy. And this is a way that that there's only one of these, because
Hmm.
that's been a persistent problem in invoice financing is,
Yeah.
and they really don't have a way of having an industry database
Hmm.
saying, at the invoice level. I mean, if you have, they will have like a database that's saying, don't do business, or, make sure that you're really getting the proper documentation and assurances from this invoice seller and that
Yeah.
invoice seller, because they've been known to sell the same invoice to two or three different lenders. And when it comes time to collect on it, it's only going to be paid once. And so that is,
Yeah.
has been a persistent problem. And so
That's
this,
been a problem. Yeah, that's been a risk in this industry for a very long time. Yeah,
yeah,
long
and so
standing.
this basically allows, to, to have that confidence. Um, so, what I see pretty rapidly within the invoice financing space is, there's going to be a push to say we only want baseline invoices, and we will give better terms for these invoices that have been baseline, because we know
Yeah.
We have the singularity and we have the permanence, that has been secured by the proof, and
Hmm.
we have that extra confidence, so we're going to give more attractive terms. And at the same time, probably in tandem, you're going to have certain lenders that are going to say, unless your invoices are baseline, don't even call us.
Hmm. Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you create that tier, you create that tier by means of business practices. People would love to work with companies like that. So I think, with this, and since this show is happening in India, I would say that there are two things which I wanted to bring out. One, there's a very famous entrepreneur. I don't know if I should be naming him, but I can name him because we name things, right? So he's Kunal Shah. He's probably the most successful fintech entrepreneur that I follow. He's built Cred. Um, and that's now in the world top 50 fintech apps, and people are having difficulty in figuring out his business model. I mean, he's sharp. So he had tweeted some days back that in India the biggest employer is not um, a government agency. The biggest employer in India is inefficiency.
Mhm.
And that may be true not only for India but for many many countries. It's just that he's here, so he tweeted for India. But I think the problem is that people look at a process and they look at ways how the same thing can be digitized. If there was a paper trail going, okay, fine, I can make a email flow, but nobody is looking at process transformation, saying that is that step really required.
Right.
So a lot of the products which are built, I would say in the past 5 years or so, were built in by with that principle. I'm digitizing, I'm removing paper. But while you're removing paper, you've got this, you've got this nuts and bolts opened. So you look under the hood and see what is really required. There's process transformation which can go hand in hand, because what really happens is, you implement a software and then you look at process transformation, and then when the process transformation has happened, then you realize that your software which was implemented very recently is of no use or lesser use than what you're envisaged. And that is why the value, I think this was something which I was reading a few days back, that billions of dollars go into digital transformation projects, but like, almost 80 to 90% fail.
Mhm.
And that's and it's only because people are getting the sequence wrong, so to say. The other thing which I wanted to bring out is, it's only a matter of time. India is looked at the back office of the world. A lot of companies are operating here which are serving customers, and sometimes their own offices in other geographies, doing processes. So there's process excellence, definitely. Oh, hello to the guest, new baseliner.
Yes, exactly.
Then there is so a lot of people are doing these processes sitting here. It may be, something as basic as medical transcription, for example,
Mhm.
or it can be something as, you know uh, it can be something as complex as fund accounting. It can be both ways. It can be complex. So there's a whole pyramid which I see, which is built here. So on one side I see, there's tons of transactions which are being passed on to these entities because the customers don't want to do it themselves. Or, when you go higher up in the food chain, or the process chain, so to say, the processes which require intelligence, that have also started coming to us. That has also, even software development, software engineering, or even, financial engineering, fund accounting, quant. A lot of quant work is happening here. So, that needs specialist skills. So so I feel that it's just in the mindset that when people start looking at these, these opportunities, that what, there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to avoid these 10 steps in a process and look at a highly optimized way of doing this. And how is technology augmenting that process which you've just designed by bringing in, things like baseline. I'm not saying baseline, don't bring baseline blindly. Baseline, again, just like blockchain, baseline again cannot solve all problems. It has to be, human, technology, process, people, everything goes together. So back to our discussion. I think I was trying to point out that a lot of companies here have their revenue at risk because their clients will eventually, it's a matter of time, they will eventually realize that the inefficiencies which I had, I have just, I've just put it in somebody else's cart, and I may be paying this guy by the hour sometimes, or by the number of inefficiencies, just to take care of something which could have been automatically synchronized using things like baseline. So it's only a matter of time, and I think now is the time the companies which are into who are into services businesses, who are into quote unquote outsourcing, or GICs, we call it GICs, global in-house centers. So those companies should start looking at their revenues and look at revenue which is at risk of being disrupted by such technology coming in, and start investing in things like baseline, so that if they come with their own platforms. Imagine an Infosys or an Accenture. I'm just popping these names out of my head. Uh, if they came up with platforms like these, and they went to their client saying, you know what, while we do your accounting, we do your we manage your ops, we manage your account payables. Uh, we can do it. Here is our platform. If you integrate your ERP we are going to give you a vendor portal. The vendors can have access to this portal. We're giving you an API. The vendors can also integrate with the same platform. This whole platform can just take care of all synchronizations, and we can just keep looking at, if there are any breaks, if at all, if there is any D-based, because I'm sure there'll be D-based records as well, and there will be somebody required to look at those as well. But the quantum is going to be like a fraction, you
Yes.
know, on
Yeah.
the whole. So that's the value which I see. That's the kind of conversations I'm trying to have with companies here.
Well, and another, big strong, important thing that we do within the enablement team is, we sit there and really want to define what
Mm,
baseline really is for the
yeah,
audience, and it really helps by defining what it isn't. Uh,
yeah. Oh
but
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
really big because we commonly say that, baseline is not a product, it's not a coin, it's not uh, um, a different, workflow package or anything. It's a technique
Yeah,
for
yeah.
basically proving consistency. And, and the only thing that is being secured is using blockchain as that proof of consistency,
Mm,
that neutral umpire between counterparties that basically says, it makes no judgments, it parses no data, it basically says true or false. Is
yes,
this baseline? Does
yes,
this match up? And
yeah,
that right there, um, everybody seems to think that I'm going to have to basically revamp my entire architecture. I'm going to have to either make a huge, substantial capital investment just to try and capture this capability. And it's like, no, you don't. I mean, any competent development team can, take the open source, baseline code and basically build upon that, bespoke to their own, environment, and it is going
mm,
to be able to communicate between the two. Um,
yeah,
another thing is if you have different state machines that are on entirely different operating environments, operating systems, and
yeah.
stuff. But so long as you have that type of translation between whatever data points,
Mm,
it all happens. So, baseline basically it doesn't introduce anything particularly new. All it
mm,
does is it basically says, yes, you are correct. You both are matched up.
yeah.
And
So,
really,
ladies and gentlemen, that's the elevator pitch from Mark Kettle right here,
yeah,
of baseline. I think it's really key that we understand that you're not required to rip off any of the existing systems. Your value of your technology investments is not going to depreciate. It's just augmenting your existing operations, and in the process also eliminating inefficiencies. Absolutely. So Mark, I had also committed that we will talk about insurance, and while you've touched upon it a bit, in your previous example, but we want to talk about what's the difference is going to cause to insurers, as well as people who are processing insurance claims. There are a lot of claims processing sort of BPOs also based out in India, so we can use that messaging for these companies as well.
Oh, absolutely. And right now, messaging is what they've largely been doing, and the best they've been able to try and tackle it is through EDI, which is coming up on 40 years old, somewhere around in there. And just because this is what we've always been using, as
Yeah,
cranky and leaky as it may be, this is
yeah,
really it beats having to take a stack of papers and back to the uh,
mm.
mail them back to the healthcare payer. And I'm like, well, that's still done. you know, and really, and a lot of the innovation is stymied by the very strict, very draconian, actually, data privacy laws that exist for a reason. I mean, within HIPAA and PHI, I
Yeah,
cannot reveal anything, or I
yeah,
run afoul of this governing body, and I'm now subject to enforcement action, and which
mm.
I don't have an appeal process. So if they say I did wrong, I have to pay the fine. I mean, I really can't fight it.
Yeah,
That's very commonly done. But the big thing, if you take a look at how you have to, really go through the process of documenting, billing, and paying for your healthcare treatments, most people don't really see it. Um,
mm.
you know, at how much is going back. Now they will see a lot. Say you
Yeah,
have a particular procedure or what we would call an episode of care, and
yeah,
say you had a colonoscopy, and within the U.S., let's just assume that all of the providers that are involved are in your network. And most people, when they are having a procedure, the only they think that their doctor is the only because that's the person that they see, and maybe the nurse
mm.
or or an anesthetist and stuff. But that's all they really think of in terms of who is providing my health care. They don't really think
Yeah,
about the lab. They don't think about the building in which it's happening in.
yeah,
They don't
yeah,
think that the anesthetist or the anesthesiologist,
mm.
of course, is going to bill twice because they're going to bill for the service and then they're going to bill for the medication that
Yeah,
that they used. And so, pretty soon, if you have have a procedure done, within a week, you're going to have anywhere from 8 to 10 pieces of mail coming to
yeah,
you. All of them, securing their place within the providing of your healthcare service, and
mm.
that
Mm.
is through a bill, because that is basically saying that is the marker that says this is what we did on this date and this is how much we are seeking payment for. And
Yeah,
all of that secures the entire claim, the body of data that goes into building everything that goes around your particular claim. And so
mm.
there is so much back and forth uh, that most, patients or users, would never see. And
Yeah,
so I think if they make it aware, and really they don't care about what's going on until they finally are saying, you owe me X amount of dollars. And they're like, what? So,
mm.
no, it can't be. Send me the copies. What are they billing for, and all of that? Well, then that's another entire can of worms that you have
Yeah,
to come in to say, okay, well, where is this document? This is the bill that we had. Well, that doesn't
yeah,
seem right. And especially when you have every few years, you're going to have an updating of the medical billing and coding taxonomy to where
yeah,
you used to use, code 1234 now uses code 123456 because they've added so many new codes and subsets of existing codes
mm.
to the
Mm.
entire taxonomy, to the entire body of that. And so it creates another inconsistency that has to be worked out.
Yeah,
And just because of the data privacy requirements, the only way of doing this is through a very cumbersome friction process. And
yeah,
so, baseline is so poised to cut through so much of that. And yes, there will be some cottage industries that will be completely destroyed
absolutely,
in the
absolutely.
process. But that is, you cannot make an omelet without cracking an egg. So there will be a lot of eggs that will be cracked on this. And,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
something you want to be aware of, because if I'm
Yeah.
pitching to a services company who
Yeah.
really has a vested interest in, this the process being as friction as
Yes.
possible, they're
Yeah.
not going to be very receptive to it. So
Mm. No, really, really. Now, somebody, put up a really interesting name on the chat, which is Reliance Industries. So, Reliance Industries is the biggest, uh, probably the biggest company in India, which is into everything. It's into consumer goods. It's got the largest telecom player, uh, largest data provider. They are into hospitals, healthcare. Even they're even doing a lot of research, gene based research as well. So I think for a company like that, adopting this, their chief digital officers should be talking to them, because a lot of times, what I feel is that their insurance claims uh, would have been processed. They would also come into the supply chain. So let's say in the overall five or six entities that you just spoke about, let's say three of their own entities may be transacting with each other,
right, right,
right? Which is currently happening just like an outsider.
right. And
So,
so much of that
so
process
yeah,
is
yeah,
ultimately, has the effect of, it delays payment. And
yeah,
within the insurance space, one thing that all of the healthcare payers are, trying to do is they want to make sure that the claim is, you know, paid, settled, and closed.
mm,
The most efficient, most advantageous time possible.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. And
so
I love the notion that you brought in, calling it body of data. So,
yeah,
so while it yeah, while calling it body of knowledge used to be a very positive term, which I understood. I think calling things as body of data, it's really intriguing for, it's positive and negative both at the same time, because people are sitting on tons of data. Uh, some companies know how to deal with it. Some companies absolutely have no idea how to deal with it.
mhm,
And if they really dig deep, they might find that 40-50% of that is not usable at all, or could have been avoided.
yeah,
So those are the kind of transformations we are talking about here on the baseline, on the baseline show. So Mark, I think we are on the top of the hour. We can probably close this call. I think it was a really interesting discussion we had
yeah,
today.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for sparing time for this one. And I truly appreciate your insights. I hope people on YouTube also find some value in this discussion.
Yeah,
And if people are watching it in future, then do share with your techie friends, and people whom you feel should be using Baseline, and also subscribe to the channel, because we keep sending out updates through the channel. Thank you so much, Mark. With that, we come to an end of today's office hours. Thank you so much, everybody.
thank you so much.
Cheers.
Glad to be on
Bye.
there. Thanks, Samrat.